Greetings. I am Representative Inga Willis, and I have the privilege and honor of welcoming you to the GLBC press conference. I am the communications chair of the largest Black caucus in the nation. Today, we are here to announce a Georgia Legislative Black Caucus for the People tour and an Operation Georgia Desert Storm. We will be introducing various pieces of legislation and our initiatives that focus on the needs of people of color and the underserved Georgians. Now, I would like to introduce you to my colleague, Representative Kim Schofield.
Thank you and good afternoon. I am State Representative Kim Schofield, representing District 63, parts of Fulton and the city of Atlanta. I'm proud to stand here to announce that this agenda and this legislation will be taken statewide. And the first piece of legislation I'd like to discuss is the Credit Desert Act of 2023. Basically, everyone deserves access to fair and equitable and affordable credit, regardless of your income or zip code. Predatory lending practices create traps for vulnerable customers that are in cycles of debt and financial instability. The Credit Reinvestment Act is vital for promoting access to credit and financial services for underserved and underrepresented communities. So the Credit Desert Act will help create a more equitable financial system and protect vulnerable consumers from exploitation. For example, there are many Georgians are unaware right now that the loan level price adjustment will be coming online and greatly impact homeowners that are existing homeowners and new homeowners. Unsolicited checks and credit score algorithms must be transparent and accountable to protect consumers from unfair practices. And this has been a problem in our area for a long time. Credit desert areas are disproportionately affecting low-income and minority communities and limit their ability to access credit and financial services. So we have maps of every district across Georgia that shows you where the credit deserts are, where the banking deserts are, financial institution, and we have to address that. The Credit Desert Act will promote economic growth and opportunity by increasing access to non-predatory loans. It will also help reduce bankruptcy rates and financial instability for low-income and underserved communities. Again, we know that everyone deserves a fair shot of financial stability. And if we're going to make this a true Georgia that is reflective of all, we're going to need to pass the Credit Desert Act and start acting accordingly. Thank you. And now I will bring up my colleague, Dr. Jasmine Clark.
Good afternoon. My name is Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark, and I represent Georgia's House District 108 in Gwinnett County. I also serve as the whip, or the House Whip of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. Far too many Georgians live in areas that would be considered a pharmacy desert. If you live in some places in Atlanta where you may see pharmacies on every corner on your commute, it may be hard to fathom that there are places in this great state where there is no pharmacy for miles. And in places where there is a lack of public transportation, pharmacies that are available may be inaccessible to those to several members in the community. The consequences of lack of access to medicine can be profound, resulting in higher cases of chronic disease and worse health outcomes. We, the members of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, believe wholeheartedly that your zip code should not impact your ability to access life-saving medicine and other healthcare services. That is why I plan to introduce the Georgia Pharmacy Desert Act. The goal of this bill will be to study this critical issue, implement strategies to increase access, and also evaluate the effectiveness of our efforts. We will accomplish this through tax credits, technical assistance, zoning and land use reform, and reducing the regulatory burdens, as well as with public-private partnerships, increasing reimbursement rates, and through pharmacy education programs. We will also, the Pharmacy Desert Act will specifically provide departmental study to identify Georgia's pharmacy deserts. It will provide negotiations with pharmacy benefit managers and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on reimbursement rates for pharmacies located in pharmacy desert areas. It will also provide funding for things such as transportation assistance and telemedicine and other methods such that so that medicine is available to our underserved communities. With these comprehensive measures, we can serve the people of Georgia in a meaningful way. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't matter if you are black, white, yellow, brown, blue, or purple. It doesn't matter if you're young or young at heart. We should all be able to agree that access to medication is fundamental to our right to live and thrive. And next, I will bring up my colleague, Representative Roger Bruce.
Hello, everybody. This works better when you put your glasses on. I'm here to talk about House Bill 289, and this bill has been introduced several times in the past, and the act that we're trying to put in place will create a supplier diversity department or unit within the Department of Administrative Services. And the purpose is to make sure that we are not in a situation where all of the contracts in state government are going to the same people. And we represent, African Americans represent about 20% of the companies in Georgia, but we only represent less than 1% of the amount of contracts that are being distributed throughout the state. This is intended to codify what the governor did during the campaign. If you remember, he appointed someone to look at the diversity, but they didn't fund it. So it's kind of hard for her to do any work without any funds to do it. And since it was done through executive order and not through legislation, the next governor could come in and just ignore it. And so what this bill is intended to do is to codify what the governor did by putting somebody in place to create a study that would look at supplier diversity and make sure that we are spreading these contracts out. And if in fact we find, and I know we will because we've already done the work, we just got to go through a formal process, we will find that the contracts are not being distributed on an equitable basis. And so the idea is to come up with different policies, different procedures, different ways to make sure that it's balanced out and equalized. And that's pretty much what it does. And we look forward to the passage of this. I thank the governor for supporting it before we dropped it again this year by putting it through executive order. I don't know if he knew he was doing that or not, but the reality is that we agree with him that this needs to be done, and we want to make sure that it happens. With that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague in the Senate. Where'd you go? Oh, there you
I'm right here, I'm right behind you. All right. All right. Good afternoon, GLBC members and members of the press. I am happy to be with you this afternoon as Vice Chair of the great Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. As we've laid out, and you've heard some of our priorities, we know several issues like housing, jobs, economic disadvantages, and social safety supports have hammered our working families and hammered an already hit Black community. We've got to continue to ensure that everyone in this state gets a fair shake and a fair shot and a chance to get ahead. We here at GLBC are firmly committed to doing our part, and we are working to address the persistent opportunities the community persistent opportunity and community-based options, and other reforms to help families of color. This is why GLBC is rolling out today the For the People campaign, as you have heard already, and which includes responsive and bold initiatives. And we're going to ask for these initiatives in the 2023 session and roll out these initiatives throughout the session. And with that, I'm done. And if we want to take questions, that's all I have to say. But I thank you all for coming, and I guess we're ready for questions. Yes. A chair. Oh, the chair hasn't spoken? I thought the chair spoke. I'm sorry. Let me introduce our esteemed chair, Representative Gilliard.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We know it's been a long, tedious day, but we've got Georgia on our mind. And so with all of the people from all over 159 counties, they have said to us, we have elected you, but we have not elected them. And we have a job to do for the people. And so today, as we stand at this defining moment, we know that Georgians are on our mind. And so as we roll out these much needed pieces of legislation, we're reminded that we must serve the citizens of Georgia, not only African Americans, but as our charter says, underserved Georgians. And so these pieces of legislation are parables to the forte of being able to take this to the people. If you remember years ago when people were marching all over the country, right in front of our Capitol, for Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many others, we have not forgotten about the power of the pen. And we as legislators have the power to legislate. And our demonstration will be going to the people with focuses of the farmers. Many years ago, tornado-ravaged storms, farmers were left out. They were left out of funding, and they were left out of opportunities to be at the table. We're going to be able to bring them back to the table with legislation that will support them. We're going to go on a Black Farmers Tour starting on March the 3rd at Fort Valley, where we will tour those farms and then sit to the table with those farmers to be able to see what their needs are. We have other individuals that have filed legislation for credit deserts. One example is the great leadership of Kim Schofield, Sandra Scott, Viola Davis, and Doreen Carter under the great leadership of Dr. Ricky Keys, going into a city like Port Wentworth, Georgia, that has $29 million in the bank, but does not have a bank. So that is a problem. That's why we've got to take it and focus on the people. So you'll see the Black Caucus being relevant, going into those communities at the table, into different cities, and being relevant outside of session. But we have a challenge right now. And the challenge, as many as our colleagues have said, it's not about Democrats or Republicans, it's about people. And so the challenge is to move Georgia forward and take this legislation, and we challenge all of our individuals in the Senate and the House to look past party lines and to look at the lines of the people that are all over this country, standing in lines because they can't afford food deserts, credit deserts. And so the lines that are forming to say that we've had enough. We don't have the hospitals that we need, so we need adequate health care. And so that's why the bill that Representative Clark talked about pharmacies are so important. So as we stand here today, we're going to open up for questions, but letting you know that we're more committed 50 years later, the largest Black caucus in the nation, and we're ready to move for the people. If you have any questions at this time. And before our Representative Bruce comes up, I'll say this. If we're the #1 place to do business in the nation, we should be able to do business with our people. The level of the percentage has been in all for years. When Senator Emanuel Jones was chair of the Black Caucus initiated that same cry. And so as the governor has moved forward on his part with the executive order, we're saying, like Dr. King said, whatever you do, be true to what you say on paper. And so we're asking, extending our hand, but it is now time to move Georgia forward and give those minority businesses, not just African Americans, but women that are DBE certified, the opportunity to earn those contracts.
If you remember several years ago, I think it was 2016, when the federal government required that the state put a program in place because of the Department of Transportation and the funds that were coming in. If we didn't have a program for transportation, that they weren't going to give us the money. So all we're saying is let's do the same thing for the entire state that we did for transportation, and that should answer your question. We just do the same thing. The difference, though, is that we need to make sure that once we set the goals, that we meet them. We have not met the goals for transportation as of yet, and we need to make sure that we do.
Okay, we know that affordable housing is a huge issue right now. There are a couple of problems. We have a supply and demand problem. There's not enough houses. There's not enough houses being built. And unfortunately, of the affordable houses that we do have, they're being bought up by investment firms, locking families out of buying homes and building wealth. So I would recommend the first initiative, we have to find a way to get developers maybe some incentive for them to start building again and building at a low cost. We actually also need to find a way to shut out these investment firms from getting ahead of real homeowners. And I think that's something legislatively that we can look at on how we can best do that so that we can make sure houses are going to families and not Wall Street. The other issue that we're having is Senator James is talking about in Urban Affairs is rent. Rent right now, you know, it used to be $500-$700. Now it's $3,000 plus. And we know the prices are where they're being driven up in communities of color, like the houses that are being bought up in communities of color. So I know we'll be discussing some initiatives on the Senate side about how we can address that, but that's the answer I have for you.
Okay, and I also have to address that on the credit side, because COVID really did cause a gap in people to be able to have sustainable living. And we saw that as the number of people that lost their homes, lost their jobs, didn't get their unemployment due to no fault of their own, that they were put in really serious financial and housing crunch. So therefore, we cannot talk about of getting new houses when people don't have the credit established or enough credit to get that. Again, if you look at zip code data, you look at how some of the credit companies have been misusing and mislabeling data, we have to also understand why the impact of them getting housing, getting jobs, getting cars, and transportation is a really serious problem right now here in Georgia.
And also, I'd like to add that we have dropped a bill on rent control. Rent control is in about 12 other states, but not in Georgia. We did have rent control back after World War II, and it lasted all the way until 1974, when the Georgia legislature put a ban on rent control. So we're going to try to lift the ban so that municipalities and counties will be able to have more control over the amount of rent. Something is terribly wrong when you're paying $500 for a one-bedroom in downtown Atlanta 10 years ago, and now you're paying $3,000 for the same one that hasn't been renovated or anything. And then we could go on, but the bottom line is we need to put a cap on what they're doing, and we can't do that until we lift the ban on rent control. And the list goes on other things that we can do.
Yeah, Representative Baseball wants to comment on this.
Thank you to my colleagues that have added information on this issue. And I actually did sit on the study committee during the fall with regards to this issue. And there are several bills that have been dropped and that are going to be dropped. As of today, we've had several. So on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, and we have been trying to work together to have a bipartisan bill and address all of the issues. So one of my colleagues today just had a press conference to outline those areas that are necessary for our people to be able to obtain a house. And so when I heard somebody talking about these investors are coming from out of state. And what they're doing right now, they're becoming the monopoly. And they are dictating, as it was said, the rent costs and the housing costs. And we have seen 15% increase in housing. And the median cost of a house right now is $352,000. And when you have individuals that are not even being paid $15 an hour, how many people can afford? And we are concentrating, I know the governor is concentrating on those businesses that are coming to supply housing for them. But what about the people that live, work, and play here and will stay here? Because what we found out also is that those investors are going to reap the benefits, and then after 5 years, they will be gone. But we still will be left with no units for the people that live here. And so we are addressing this issue. You're going to see several different bills, and just let us know what you need to know, and we'll help you.
This is anybody, this housing issue, whether it's homeownership or renting a home, is such a conundrum in Metro Atlanta, all across the state, as everybody here has just outlined. It involves a lot of private developers, and it involves a lot of municipalities and county jurisdictions. So what, and I promise to read all the bills that have dropped, but what are some very specific, concrete things the state can do through legislation to address this issue?
Well, when you talk about housing, and I go back to digress to our senator when she was talking about the costs of rentals and homes. You know, in 1863, the legislation was written dealing with rentals, and the legislation has not been changed on even a clause of a grace period of what that landlord might be able to administrate. We have a bill dealing with that simple portion. For some people who cannot buy a house, they're still trying to rent, and it's being forced out after they have been done due diligence for renting that home, but now someone else is coming in that has better credit and is able to pay 3 times more. So it protects those individuals that are due diligence, good renters, but they're just being forced out. I think what you'll see from the caucus is that we care enough to take time to look at all those entities in housing and the need for more housing developers. Right in Garden City, Georgia, where Georgia Port Authority is located, there are 4 groups of developers that are coming in already that are outside. And so now they'll dictate, as they said before, the prices of the rentals, the prices of the homes that we bought in a city that is 27.9% in poverty. You do the math.
Can I say something about, and also, last year, I had 5 different, committee, hearings on HOAs and on, condominium, associations as well, because in the state of Georgia and all over, the HOAs now, people could not afford during the pandemic and, after losing jobs, could not afford to pay their HOA. They were paying mortgage and insurance. And as a result, they got behind and they got liens put on them. And if you get up to $2,000 worth of liens, even if you have $1 million house, then they can foreclose on you, and someone can take your house right from up under you. So we need to protect the rights of home buyers, as well as those who are in condominiums. And most of these HOA boards and lawyers are the ones purchasing these people's homes. So it's we have to put some laws in place. We're attempting to do that, and we need to study the issue, and I would love for our Black Caucus to take this as an issue, because it is people of color who are in the majority of the homes that are being snatched. And also, they can't purchase a home for a while once they get that foreclosure against them. So we need to look at that law. And so those is just some of the things that we need to look at. And look at the rent, the ARPA money, the American Rescue Plan money that was given for rent control or to help the renters and first-time home buyers who were behind. Atlanta just sent back $12 million because they did not take the applications of those. Everybody had to have the application in by October 28th of 22.
Look.
And they did, we had the ARPA hearings here too. And we made sure that everybody knew about it. But the cities did not give the money. So, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator James. And we're indulged and we're involved. We're going to get ready to wrap up, but we want you to know that you can reach out to us about any of these upcoming bills and legislations. We're going to be working them diligently. Our Heritage Dinner comes up on next week, the 23rd. We're celebrating 50 years of the most relevant and largest caucus in the nation. We invite you to be a part of that. Thank you so much for taking time to come out on today to be with us.